Want to connect with a family member who doesn't speak your language? Then check out the language learning program Rosetta Stone on desktop or as an app. Rosetta Stone is designed to immerse you in the language you're learning through an intuitive process. Plus, the True Accent feature even gives you feedback on your pronunciation. And with a lifetime membership, you have access to all 25 offered languages. Get started today. Visit rosettastone.com/pod50 to get 50% off your lifetime membership now. That's rosettastone.com/pod50 for 50% off.
If your child is struggling in school, then IXL is right for your family. IXL is an online learning program for kids that covers math, language arts, science, and social studies. Backed by research, kids using IXL are scoring higher on tests. It's no wonder it's used in 95% of the top 100 school districts in the U.S. Plus, a month of IXL costs less than an hour of tutoring. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/20. Visit IXL.com/20 to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price.
This is True Crime Garage. And this is the case of the West Memphis 3.
The West Memphis 3. Damien Echols. Jason Baldwin.
Jessie Misskelley.
The West Memphis 3. Damien Echols. Jason Baldwin.
Jessie Misskelley.
The West Memphis 3. The West Memphis 3.
We've had 3 children missing since last night. 3 young boys murdered in cold blood. It appeared that they had been sexually mutilated.
Is it your opinion that these crimes were motivated by occult beliefs?
Yes.
The West Memphis 3.
Arrested at 2:44 p.m., charged with 3 counts of capital murder.
It was like a nuclear bomb going off in the courtroom.
In a statement given to the police, 17-year-old Jessie Misskelley allegedly confesses to watching 2 other suspects choke, rape, and sexually mutilate 3 West Memphis second graders.
In 1993, the small Arkansas town of West Memphis was rocked by the gruesome killing of 3 8-year-old boys. A police investigation brought murder charges against 3 local teens. Damien Echols. Jason Baldwin.
Jessie Misskelley.
This is not just
Who do you believe is the real killer?
Terry Wayne Hobbs.
Amen.
I don't know how much clearer I have to make it. None of my DNA was there. None of the West Memphis 3's DNA was there.
What makes you so sure it's Hobbs? What makes you so sure that it's Terry Hobbs?
Pardon me?
What makes you so sure that it's Terry Hobbs?
Well, his DNA was found there in the lace of Michael Moore. David Jacoby's hair was there. What did it do? Fly there on Harry Potter's wand? It either fell off of Terry Hobbs or he was there. There's no other 2 ways about it. None of the West Memphis 3's DNA was there. This is not just.
Damien Echols. Jason Baldwin.
Jessie Misskelley. Jessie Misskelley.
The West Memphis 3. Damien Echols. Jason Baldwin.
Jessie Misskelley.
the West Memphis 3.
This is not justice.
The West Memphis 3.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, the Captain.
Thank you. It's good to be seen, and it's good to see you.
Captain, this week our beer of the week is Elvis Juice by Brew out of Scotland. Garage grade, we're giving it 4 out of 5 bottle caps. This is an IPA with a bitter edge that will push your citrus tolerance to the brink. Great hop level with a touch of grapefruit peel. Pick some up today and enjoy responsibly with your garage friends. Elvis Juice was brought to us by Gregory in Ottawa, Ontario, Jennifer in Luxembourg, Wisconsin. She's a longtime friend of the garage. Jason in Renton, Washington, and Michael in LA, who enjoyed hearing that the Spurs are one of my favorite basketball teams. So thank you to Gregory, Jennifer, Jason, and Michael for providing the beer this week. And if you want to buy us around for next week's show, go to truecrimegarage.com, click on the donate button.
And if you go to contact, we now have a mailbox. So you can send us fan mail, fan art, you can send us beer, you can send us donations, whatever you want.
So check that out at truecrimegarage.com. This week we are covering the West Memphis 3. This is part 2. So if you didn't tune into last week's show, stop what you're doing right now, go back, listen, and pick up here. When we left off last week, we were discussing the investigation. Now, lead investigator Gary Gitchell, he had a strategy for investigating the murders of these 3 boys. Now, his strategy, that it was one of 3 circumstances, that either A, somebody that knew one or all of the boys committed this crime, or B, someone that didn't know any of the boys committed this crime, or C, that this crime was committed by a gang or a cult, a group of people that may or may not have known the boys. So we're going to continue along that investigation. And first of all, I want to talk about the families. So this would be people that knew one or all of the boys. We're going to talk about their movements on May 5th, 1993. Now, these are coming from police reports. So from the police reports, we have information on all 3 families, on the Moore family, the Branch family, and the Byers family. For the Moore family, we have father and mother, Todd and Dana Moore. Now, Todd, he was nowhere near the area of West Memphis on the night of May 5th.
Because he's a truck driver, correct?
Yes, he's a truck driver, and he did not return from his truck run until about 5 or 5:15 a.m. on May 6th. Now, he did join the search when he got home. He joined the search that morning because the family members, neighborhood people, the police, they were looking for the boys that night. Well, they never found them, so the search continued on May 6th. Now, his wife, Dana Moore, these are both biological parents to Michael Moore. His wife, Dana Moore, she was one of the people to have seen the kids last. She reports having seen the kids sometime between 6 and 6:30 p.m. on May 5th. Now, she saw them riding bicycles. She saw 3 boys, Chris Byers, Stevie Branch, and Michael Moore, her son, riding 2 bicycles, and they were heading north towards Goodwin. Now, Michael Moore had a sister, Dawn Moore. She was about 10 years old at the time, and she was interviewed as well. And she was sent by her mother, Dana, to look for the boys. After they went missing, they're not technically missing at this point, but after she had saw her son and his 2 friends going north, she wanted her son to come home. So she sent her daughter, 10-year-old Dawn Moore, to go look for the boys and tell Michael to come home.
Which is pretty typical. I mean, she's probably cooking dinner at this point, and then she says, you go find him, bring him back, it's time for dinner.
Yeah, and this is a fairly safe neighborhood. It's a kind of a close-knit community. This neighborhood is all like 3-bedroom homes, kind of very middle class. And you kind of know most of the people that live on your street or in the neighborhood. You've had discussions with them or met them at some point.
Yeah, it's lower middle class, probably nationwide, but in that area, probably middle class, maybe a little higher than that.
Yeah, 3-bedroom homes. Some of them even have swimming pools. And she sent her daughter, Dawn Moore, who's 10 years old, sent her off on her bike to go retrieve Michael Moore. Well, she comes home and she says that she never saw the boys that day.
Couldn't find them
and never saw them. But she also gives some more information to police. She says that she's not quite sure what time, she says about 5:30 or 6, which doesn't fully line up with what Dana Moore had said. But again, she's 10 years old, so she probably doesn't know exactly what time it is.
Right. She could be off by 30 minutes to an hour.
Yes. Dana said she had seen him about 6:30. So now the police are going to, they realize that Dawn probably doesn't know exactly what time she was looking for her brother. So you can tell this because they ask her, well, was it still light outside? And she does say, yes, the sun was still out. It was still light outside when I went looking for my brother. She said that when she was looking for her brother, that she had noticed 3 boys coming out of the Robin Hood Hills. Now, that is the wooded area that is just north of their home. It's about a quarter of a mile from their home.
Right.
She sees 3 boys coming out of there. Now, these look to be about junior high, maybe teenager age boys. Mm-hmm. And she describes the 3 of them as 1 white male and 2 black males coming out of the woods. And she stated even further that they were coming out of the Robin Hood area that leads down near the ditch that goes to what the kids call the Devil's Den. And she had said that when she rode up by the boys and they were walking out, that one of the boys had asked her if she wanted a shot. Now, she didn't know she's 10 years old. She doesn't really know what this means. Who knows what they were talking about, but she assumed that it meant something to do with drugs, kind of scared her off, and she decided to ride home.
Right.
Now, she would describe these boys as the white male was wearing yellow and black shorts, and he had a yellow and black top as well, shirt, and he had striped shoes. She didn't provide much information about the 2 black males that she had seen. Now, again, she expected them to be about teenager age. And when the police probed further, she would go on to say maybe 17. She had also said that she had seen these same boys. She had seen about 45 minutes later, she had seen the white male and at least one of the black males going into a house north of Goodwin that was close to the Goodwin Avenue. And this was about the 4th house off of Goodwin on the west side, she stated. Okay. So what do we have here, Captain? We have the sister who is seeing these people coming out of the woods, and it was suspected at some point that the kids had gone into the Robin Hood Hills.
Right.
And so she's seeing these kids probably, if her mom says 6 to 6:30 that she last saw them and sent the daughter off looking for them, it wouldn't take very long to ride your bike a quarter of a mile to get to the Robin Hood Hills. So what are we talking about here, Captain? Probably 6:15, maybe 6:45.
Yeah, again, it's tough with all this stuff because, I mean, a lot of these eyewitness accounts, they could be off by an hour, sometimes more.
And she's saying about 45 minutes later, she saw them go into a house. Now, again,
right. It could have been 15 minutes later. It could have been
an hour later. Who knows?
Yeah. And I'm not claiming that she's not telling the truth. I'm just saying that she's 10 years old. Especially a 10-year-old is going to have difficulty with time management.
Now, this brings us to the Byers family.
And also, let's go back for 1 second. She's not questioned until days after the events.
Correct. It looks like the one thing... So Gary Gitchell's approach to this case was that it was either somebody that knew the boys, didn't know the boys, or it was a gang.
Yeah, we heard you.
But one thing that I noticed when going through the police reports, the detectives, Gary Gitchell leading the investigation, they didn't seem to do a real good job of investigating the families. They didn't ask them a lot of questions, and if they did, they didn't put pen to paper and make record of that.
Right, there's not enough notes on it.
Yeah, so this police report is actually dated many days after the discovery of the boys, and it actually has a different date up at the top. So it was submitted later than what they're saying the report was taken.
Right.
So is this somebody sitting down and putting pen to paper and making this report, or is this a detective's recollection of what he discussed with Dawn?
Yeah, so I sit down, I talk with Dawn, and then a couple days later I write down. So it's like it could be a count of an account, right?
Yeah, and it appears that most of the family members of the victims were interviewed as far as reports were filed on the 10th of May. So they disappeared on the 5th, they were found dead on the 6th, and now at least 4 days have gone by before we're writing these reports.
Yeah, but and the reports they're taking on are from 5 days ago.
Yeah, not only that, there's very few notes on them. So that would make one infer that there was probably not a whole lot of questions involved to this interview.
Which I understand a little bit because it's a sensitive subject. You have three parents, three sets of parents that lost their kids, and then you have to question them. And I think that would be difficult for anybody.
The strange thing about Don Moore's report is that at the bottom of the page, the investigator that had discussed this with Don Moore had wrote that sometimes people in a cult paint their faces black. So the investigator's not fully believing that maybe this child had seen a white man and two black men coming out of the woods, that maybe it was three white men.
Yeah, I was wondering too, maybe she just got confused. Maybe two of the suspects were wearing black, and maybe that was just enough for her to throw off her memory.
It could have been, but we do,
or that they're muddy.
I like the muddy idea a little bit, but
that makes more sense to me than painting your face black.
It also makes more sense to me than if the kids were wearing black, because she does state that the white kid was wearing black and yellow clothes. So this brings us to the Byers family. Now, Melissa Byers is the mother of Chris Byers. And just to clear everything up real quick, John Mark Byers is her husband. They've both been married before. And John Mark Byers is technically the stepfather of Christopher Byers. He's one of the boys that was found dead in the woods. Mm-hmm. He's also the stepfather of Ryan. Now, Ryan has a different last name than Christopher Byers, because Christopher Byers, from what we have heard, was technically adopted by John Mark Byers. Mm-hmm. Now, some people have pointed out that this is strange that he would adopt one boy and not the other, and we can all agree that John Mark Byers is an animated character, and that there is some strangeness to him. I find that this speculation is really just kind of BS. When I found out the real story was that Melissa was pregnant with Christopher at the time that she had met John Mark Byers.
Right.
So Christopher, for the most part, for his entire life, John Mark was involved.
Not for the most part.
Well, yeah, for
the whole part.
Yeah, for his entire life, John Mark was involved. They lived together, and he wasn't technically his father; he was his stepfather. And Christopher Byers did know that he had a real father elsewhere, and had met him on what sounds like just a few occasions.
Yeah, real gem of a person.
Well, Melissa Byers would state that she was home sometime around or after 5:30 p.m. that day, and she between 5:30 and 6:30 sees Chris come in and out of the house several times. Now, she's on the phone with her boss, and so she doesn't really know what he's coming in and out of the house for.
Yeah.
But, she says he may have came in to get something to drink. He may have came in to get a toy or a skateboard. Maybe he came in to get a cookie or something to eat.
This was very common when you're kids, especially it's May. It's May 5th, so it's a little hotter, so you're playing outside with your buddies. And your parents would be on the phone, not all the time, but, my mother was on the phone constantly. So it was constantly like going in and out of the house and grabbing stuff, and you just see her and she'd wave you off,
And because John Mark Byers, we're going to get to him right now, but because he was considered a suspect by some or...
Well, I just want to say he has an interesting jib.
Yeah, a strange jib. But because he's a suspect in some of the public's eye, I do want to clear something up real quick. While we're going through the events of the movements of these persons, the family in particular, on May 5th, we are talking about what I was able to, and you were able to figure out is multiple accounts. This is not just Melissa Byers saying I was home at this time.
Right. It's basically of all the eyewitnesses, then we compile all that together. And then we put a timeline together instead of just taking your word,
And if at any time that there's one person that is by themselves that says, I was here doing this, and there's no other person to back that up, we will let you know. But all of these accounts that we will go through that we don't state otherwise is backed up by somebody else's account. Now, that might be simply a husband backing up a wife or a wife repeating something that her husband said, but it's at least two characters that are involved in this case. Now, with John Mark Byers, he says that he noticed that Chris was missing around 6:30 p.m. He had come home. He had brought his other stepson home, Ryan. Mm-hmm. They were off driving, and I believe there was a court appearance that Ryan had to attend. Ryan had seen like a hit and run or some kind of car accident, and he was a witness in the case. Now, John Mark had dropped Ryan off to do whatever he had to do at the courthouse, picked him up, and brought him home. When he had come home, he wanted to talk to Melissa. He's saying, where is Christopher?
Right.
And she goes, well, she's, I'm on the phone, gives him the 1 minute, give me a minute here, John. And she tells John that Chris is probably in his room. And if he's not in his room, he's outside playing. Well, John says, I know he's not outside playing. I just pulled up. And when he had last seen Christopher Byers, Christopher had gotten in trouble that day. John had seen him riding around. He was riding, when people ride on their belly on the skateboard? Uh-huh. So Chris liked to skateboard, and he was riding on his belly, but he was just kind of riding carelessly down the road on his belly.
Right, which a car wouldn't be able to see you.
No, he's a little boy. So John, and this is probably, this is not how you should raise children, but again, this is 1993, and it's West Memphis. Who knows? But he says that this upset him, and he wanted to, he explained to Christopher that this is not how you behave. This is careless behavior, reckless behavior.
Right.
And he punished him. He gave him a whack or two with his belt. And
see, I'd argue this is the way you raise your kid. I mean, because he didn't give him whacks for no reason. He gave him whacks for his safety.
Yeah.
And so what a lot of psychologists say is you actually punish this stuff more in children because you're
bad behavior.
Yeah, because you're teaching. Well, it's bad behavior regardless, but it's a safety issue. Like, make a big deal about not playing in the road. Make a big deal about not talking to strangers. Make, some of the little stuff about cleaning your room. Don't just smack your kid for no reason, but really harp on stuff that is when they're putting themselves in danger. Oh, I'm going to touch the stove or whatever it is.
I'm playing on the train tracks.
Exactly. These are big issues, and that's what a lot of psychologists say.
So you want to do something that would make them remember this so that they don't repeat the behavior.
Right, and it's for their safety. It's not like he's just whooping them to whoop him,
Well, when he had last seen him after the punishment was dealt, he had told Christopher that he could go play with his friends, but he wanted him to clean up the carport before he went and did that. So when John Mark left the house, he had last seen Christopher cleaning up the carport area.
Yeah, and it could have just been, his toys could have just been out.
So he goes home and he sees his wife on the phone with her boss. She tells him just 1 minute. He goes and looks in her room, in Christopher's room. He's not there. Well, they decide that they're going to drive through the neighborhood and start looking for the boy. He was supposed to be home by this time.
Well, and it's also dinner time. And so you just picked up your one stepson. You probably want to eat, get your whole family together, start closing in for the night. It's 1993. This is back in the day when by 8, 9 o'clock, towns were shutting down.
Yeah, so this is 6:30 or 6:45 in the evening. Now, here's the thing, though. Some people have pointed out, well, why would they just jump in the car and go looking for him? And according to John Mark and according to his wife and the stepson Ryan backs this up as well, that they drove through the neighborhood asking people had they seen Christopher Byers.
Right.
One person they would talk to is Dana Moore, and the reason being is basically the Byers and the Moores were next door neighbors. I believe the Byers lived right across the street from the Moores. And so they knew that Michael Moore and Christopher Byers played together often. So they wanted to see, hey, was he with Michael Moore?
Right.
They asked Dana, and this is where Dana says, yeah, I did just see them. Just not too long ago, saw them heading north towards Goodwin. And
three boys.
2
bikes.
And she says, I believe they were with Stevie Branch because Stevie Branch's dad, she's talking about Terry Hobbs,
which is his stepfather.
Yep, had come by the home, by Dana Moore's home, and was asking about the boys. He was out looking for his stepson. So the Byers would continue on. They would drive around in their vehicle and they would ask people in the neighborhood and check the streets. They kept thinking that they would either see the boys riding around on the bicycles or that maybe the boys were in somebody's home watching TV or playing in somebody's home or backyard and that they would see the bikes out front. Now, one thing that was a little bit weird was Christopher Byers was not on a bicycle. He was on his skateboard. And while they were out looking for him, they found the skateboard, which would make sense why some people reported seeing 3 boys on 2 bicycles.
Well, sometimes you get tired of trying to keep up with your buddies when you're on the skateboard, so you just ditch the skateboard.
And you jump on the back or jump on the front of the bike.
Correct.
They don't end up finding Christopher. And what happens is when they're out looking, John Mark Byers comes up and he sees a police officer in the area. And he says to the officer, he says, "Hey, we're out looking for our 8-year-old son. We can't find him.
Right.
And, what should we do?" Well, the police officer says, "Well, how long have you been looking for him?" He says, "Oh, maybe 45 minutes or an hour."
Right. It's still a long time, though.
And the police officer says, "Okay, what time is it?" John Mark says something like it's about 7:30 or it's a little after 7:30.
Okay.
The police officer says, "What you should do is, why don't you either continue looking or go home and give it till about 8 o'clock. If your son is not returned home by 8 o'clock, then you need to call the police station and file a missing persons report."
Right.
Very good information. Very good advice. Now, here's one thing that I've always found strange. A lot of people that think that John Mark Byers might have had something to do with the missing boys is that they wondered why would he jump to a conclusion and call police so soon. Well, the reason why he's out looking for Christopher, not only was Christopher supposed to be home, but they were going out to dinner. You had talked about maybe they wanted to sit down to dinner. Well, you can't.
You could have brought it up when I brought it up.
Right, but a little
You
suspense.
could have brought it up when I brought it up.
Little suspense. But the thing is, they didn't have anything set out for dinner. Melissa wasn't preparing dinner. They were when John Mark came home with Ryan, it was planned that the 4 of them would go out to dinner together. Well, they can't go out to dinner while their 8-year-old is not at home or not with them.
Well, they could, but that'd be questionable, right?
So in the beginning stages of looking for Christopher Byers, they're not like panicking looking for their son. They're just thinking, "Oh, he stayed out longer than he doesn't know what time it is.
Right.
We'll go find him in the neighborhood somewhere. He'll get in the car and we'll all go out to eat." Well, during this search, they never find him. Well, and another thing that people point out is, well, why would John Mark Byers be so quick to call police? Well, he was instructed by a police officer to call the police department if his son was still missing at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, and if you're a parent and you actually care about your kids, I mean, after an hour of not being able to find your kids, I mean, you'd start getting freaked out. I think I would call the cops as well.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors, big and small. When we keep them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest and to figure out how to work through whatever's weighing you down.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, I highly recommend that you give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/garage today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/garage. This show is proudly sponsored by BetterHelp. Check out BetterHelp.com/garage today.
The best part of spring cleaning takeaway is the post-clean clarity you get. It's kind of like when you find out that you've been paying a fortune for wireless. When Mint Mobile has phone plans for $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. It's time to switch to Mint Mobile. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's limited time deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. Save a lot of money with Mint Mobile. Get their great mobile wireless service delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. That's premium service at a great price. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/TCG. That's mintmobile.com/TCG. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/TCG. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Want to connect with a family member who doesn't speak your language? Then check out the language learning program Rosetta Stone on desktop or as an app. Rosetta Stone is designed to immerse you in the language you're learning through an intuitive process. Plus, the True Accent feature even gives you feedback on your pronunciation. And with a lifetime membership, you have access to all 25 offered languages. Get started today. Visit rosettastone.com/pod50 to get 50% off your lifetime membership now. That's rosettastone.com/pod50 for 50% off.
So John Mark Byers heads home with his family, and he gets home, and he's home just before 8 o'clock. He sees Dana Moore one more time. He tells her, "I was told to call the police if the boys don't return by 8 o'clock."
Right.
It's at this time that he meets Terry Hobbs. As you had said, Terry Hobbs is the stepfather for Stevie Branch.
Yeah, and they've never met until this day.
Correct. Now, they talk for a little bit, and John Mark Byers tells the other parents, "I'm going to go into the house and I'm going to call the police station."
Right.
He actually calls the county sheriff's office, and he makes a complaint that his son is missing. And the county sheriff's office tells him, "You need to call the local police department." Mm-hmm. He hangs up the phone, and this is when he calls the police department. Well, shortly after calling the police is when the officer arrives, Regina Meeks. She arrives and she takes the missing persons report from John Mark Byers. Now, one thing that some people would point out was strange was that John Mark Byers had said in his report that Christopher Byers was taking Ritalin or some kind of mood altercation because he had that hypertension, or not hypertension, but
hypertension. He had hypertension. 8-year-old hypertension.
What's that called? The ADD.
Right. ADHD.
Yeah, he had that.
Okay.
He explains to the officer that Christopher has not taken his medication. Now, some would point out that this is weird, but hopefully none of our listeners have had to place a missing persons report. But what happens typically, and one thing that officers are trained to do, is when they show up to take a missing persons report, they are going to ask you, is this person on any medication? Reason being is if any of this stuff is important, if they need to take this stuff tonight or early the next morning, whatever, they need to know what that is, because this could make an already bad situation, a concerned situation, more urgent.
Yeah, definitely more urgent.
So rather than think that it's strange for John Mark to say that Christopher had not taken his medication, I actually applaud the officer for asking the appropriate questions. Anyway, after giving the report, John Mark Byers and his stepson Ryan, they will continue their search. They go out in a vehicle and they're looking the neighborhood and they're looking in the woods. They decide that they want to look in the Robin Hood Hills wooded area. Now, it's a bit confusing of where they searched because Byers would end up searching quite a bit of the woods that night.
And just a reminder that it's about 4 acres. And so it's kind of a thin line, then the pipe, and then it kind of opens up and it's a little bit bigger towards the interstate.
Yeah. You have the neighborhood, and just north of that, you have that thin tree line that the captain was talking about. And then you have the larger wooded area that's north of that thin tree line.
Yeah.
Those two parts of the woods are separated by the 10-mile bayou. and there is that large pipe that you could walk across to get to the larger wooded area.
Yeah, this is the pipe that most people know. There's a famous picture when they pulled out the two bicycles, they laid the two bicycles on the pipe. And if you look it up on the internet, it's a pretty popular picture of this case.
Yeah, they found one bicycle on one side of the pipe and the other bicycle on the other, and both appeared obviously to have been thrown from the pipe. Anyway, the thing here is Byers, as well as plenty of other people, would search the wooded area several times that night and again the following morning. So it gets a little confusing as to what part of the woods they were in and what part they weren't in and at what time they could be. However, I do want to point out here that Mark Byers was not by himself at this time. He had gone to the woods to look for his son and the other missing boys, and with him he had taken his stepson, Ryan. And when he's there, Ryan had kind of recruited, at this time, it's a small, it's a neighborhood. People have seen people have seen a police report, police officers looking for somebody in the area. Word's kind of gotten out that some boys are missing.
Yeah, in any neighborhood, once you see the cops come, then like everybody looks outside to see what the heck's going on, and then people get nosy Nancy. And they're like, oh, what's happening? And then so it's a community search. And a lot of the parents, Hobbs will talk about this. I believe Byers talks about this a little bit. But, it's anywhere from 20 to 40 people that are out looking.
Yeah, and Ryan especially he's a teenager. He's not a small boy like Christopher. So he and some of his friends are searching too. So during Mark Byers' search of this woods at this time, also in the woods, we have Terry Hobbs. He comes across Terry Hobbs, and Terry Hobbs is out looking as well in the wooded area. And John Mark is uncertain if Terry was with somebody or if he was by himself, but they spoke for a little bit, and Byers had said, hey, I've been searching over here. Terry says, I've been searching over in this area. And they agree that they should probably they should spread out.
Right.
And one search one side, one search the other side. So it's unclear what side each person was searching on or what was the division between the two of them.
But they're not the only people searching, is what I'm saying. There's 20-some people out there, 20 to 40 people out there.
Yeah, and you have Ryan, who's with some of his other teenage friends. He's with Richie and a boy named Brett, and they're kind of searching the area together. Now, this is after dark time. And it's about 9:30. John Mark Byers says they searched until approximately 9:30. He comes out of the woods because he doesn't have a flashlight.
Yeah, it's a full moon, but at 9:30, especially in this dense woods, it's probably hard to see where you're walking. It's probably not too safe. You're also going over areas that you probably have looked for before.
Yeah, and he gets out of the woods and he's going to go ask somebody if he can borrow a light, knock on somebody's door that he might know.
Right.
But before he can do that, he sees a police officer. And the police officer is aware that there are children or a child that is missing.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm looking for my son. I'm going to go get a flashlight. The police officer says, let me help you search. So now John Mark Byers goes into the woods with a police officer. They walk around. He said that they went into the tree line area, that they did go past the pipe. They went up and down some trails, and they even went up by the water, and the police officer shined his light into the water.
Right, but this is muddy water. I mean, you can't see the bottom through this water. It's muddy.
So they searched the area until from about 10:30ish. Is the best time that I could put on this. And John Mark Byers says to the police officer, what should I do? I don't know what to do. We've looked all over. We can't find him.
Right. Part of him probably feels like it's pointless, like he's a dog chasing his tail. And as a parent, you don't want to stop looking, you want to keep, you'll use as much energy as you can to fix this problem. But he's now at the point where he's going, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So he's asking the police officer, what do I do?
Well, and the police officer says, here's what I would do. We're going to keep searching. We're going to keep driving up and down the roads, and if we see bicycles or if we see the boys, we'll send them home or we'll call it in or whatever. We're going to keep looking, but they don't want to keep looking in the woods. It's late. The woods are tough to look, and the mosquitoes are bad. So the police officer is going to drive up and down the roads, drive up and down the streets, and he tells Mark Byers, what you should do is you should probably get in contact with the officer that you originally filed the report with and ask them if there's any updates in the missing persons report.
Right.
John Mark Byers goes home around 11 p.m., and this is when he does contact the police officers, and he calls Regina Meeks, who took the missing persons report, asking for if there's any update on his missing son. And she tells him, no, he's still missing at this time, and we are still looking, and that she will have the current officers that are currently working, they will tell the next shift to be on the lookout for these boys as well. Byers hangs up the phone, and then after that, he calls the sheriff's department, and he complains to the sheriff's department that they should probably have search and rescue out in the area, that his son is missing, there are 2 other boys that are missing, and that he finds it absurd that there's not a search and rescue team out here other than just these police officers and some neighborhood people looking for these boys. After he gets off the phone, after he gets done complaining to the sheriff's department, he and his stepson Ryan decide to go back out, and they want to search the woods one more time. Now, it's pretty late at this time, and they pull up by the Blue Beacon, behind the Blue Beacon, and they're going to search the woods along that Blue Beacon area.
Right.
Now, one thing that is weird here, but this also corroborates with his story. He says that I'm out with my stepson Ryan. We're searching the woods area. There are 2 Blue Beacon employees, and he kind of yells at him, and he says, "Hey, have you guys seen any boys?" And the Blue Beacon employees say, "No, we haven't seen any boys." And there's been other people that have come by and asked about these boys as well. He says, well, I just want you to know that me and my son are going to be searching in the woods here, and that's why my car will be over here.
Right.
Some people have pointed out that maybe he's trying to bring up why, maybe this is buying an alibi, why his car would be seen in the area. I actually think that it's just plain and simple. It's out of respect for the business. I'm here on your property with my vehicle. It's very late at night. I want you to know what I'm doing because I'm not out breaking into something or looking to make trouble. I'm here trying to find my son. At this time, they don't actually go into the woods. Again, it's very late. What he says is that he let Ryan kind of drive his car, kind of let it idle along the tree line and keep the lights shining. And he walked along and just inside of the woods a bit. And he was basically just yelling out the children's names, hoping to hear one of them or hear something or see something. They don't find anything, and they go home at midnight. This is around midnight. And when he gets home, this is when he says that he tells Ryan that he should probably go to bed. After sending Ryan to bed...
Because Ryan has school the next day.
Exactly. And Byers goes out front, and he's basically goes out to the street, and he's standing underneath the street light, and he meets up with some of the other parents. His wife is out there with him, Melissa Byers, and they talk to Dana Moore. They talk to Terry Hobbs. They talk to Terry Hobbs's father-in-law, and they also talk with Terry Hobbs has brought a friend with him. Now, Byers would say that he either didn't know the name of the friend or he did not recall the name of the friend at the time of giving this report.
Well, but we know that Byers doesn't really know Hobbs at this point. He met him that day.
He had met him for the first time that day. You're exactly right. And they stand out there, and he said they talked for quite some time. They all wondered where the boys could be. They all kind of told stories of who they had talked to and what was related to them. And they even started to speculate a little bit of what could have happened to the boys and where they could be. And Byers goes on to express his concern to the other parents that he was disappointed that the sheriff's department didn't show up with search and rescue. Now, somebody in the group, it's unbeknownst to the members of that group that was out talking that night, but at some point, somebody in the group says that, I hope that they didn't drown in the water out there. There's that 10-mile bayou. There's also that, the drainage ditch.
Yeah.
There is some water out there, and that was a concern amongst all of the parents.
Yeah, I mean, even in pools, you'd have accidental drowning. So this would be something that I think a natural conclusion that one might come to.
Byers says that he doesn't know how long they stood out there talking, but it seemed to be quite some bit of time. And then he said after they were done talking, he went out briefly. And this would have just, if you put the timeline together, Captain, he could have only gone out for probably a half an hour, maybe 20 minutes at the most. Now, at this point, he does not have anybody else to back up his story, other than the parents having said that they saw him and spoke with him out underneath the street light. Thank you. And that at some point they broke up, and then Byers says he went out and he searched for a little bit by himself. He went home. He says he was home about 2:30 in the morning.
But there's also reports of just people out in general looking. Other people that might not just be the parents. There's still people in the community out looking.
Yeah, he would say that he didn't know who some of these people were, but while he was out, he had seen other people that were on four-wheelers and driving around the neighborhood and kind of looking and asking for the boys.
Yeah, Nosy Nancy. Which, I mean, they're being respectful of the neighborhood and trying to find these kids, but still it's Nosy Nancy.
He claims to have gotten home about 2:30, maybe 3 at the very latest. He says that at this time he was unable to sleep. His wife was at home during this time. He was unable to sleep. It was too late. He was too tired, and he couldn't search anymore that night. But he said because he was so stressed and so worried, all he could do was basically sit and wait for daylight.
Yeah,
there was no point in searching at this point.
And at that point, you're so exhausted, you almost get the sick feeling. You know, you can't sleep, but but you're so exhausted.
He doesn't know exactly what time, but he says about 5:30, maybe 6 at the very latest. There's a knock at his door, and he opens up the door, and it's some of the other parents. Now, at this point, he sees Terry Hobbs, and again, he believes that Terry Hobbs' father-in-law is there as well. This would be Stevie Branch's grandfather. And at this point, this is where Todd Moore has now come home. He's aware that his son is still missing, and now he's going to join the search. And at this point, John Mark Byers, as well as Melissa Byers, they go out and they continue to search for their son and the other 2 missing boys. Along on that search as well, at some point, would be Pam Hobbs. She would either join them or she was there at the door. The recollection's a little unclear, but she was involved in searching that morning. Now let's go through the Hobbs family. So now Pam Hobbs has a little bit better of an understanding of May 5th, where she actually saw some of the boys a little bit more than the other parents may have. Mm-hmm. So she says that, she worked second shift. So she's at home, she's alone, and her husband, Terry Hobbs, he's the stepfather of Stevie Branch. Now they actually have a daughter together, and their daughter's name is Amanda. She's 4 years old at 1993. Now, Terry Hobbs is working for the Memphis ice cream company. He goes out and he has like a sales route. He goes to different stores and he checks their coolers and refills whatever needs replenishing and tries to upsell and sell different items to them.
Yeah, we need some ice cream in the garage.
It's hot in the garage. Anyway, Terry Hobbs will go in very early, sometimes at 5:30 in the morning, and this would allow him to get off pretty early in the afternoon. Pam would say sometimes he would be home at 2:30, 3:30. Now, Terry would say that
Well, that's a tough thing when you have 2 parents, even one being a step parent, but they're working opposite schedules. So it helps one to take care of the kids so you don't have to get babysitting and stuff like that, but it's still kind of a odd schedule to keep the family together.
Well, and it's something you got to do. I mean, Pam typically would go to work about 4:30, maybe 5 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And she would work sometimes a shorter shift. She might go in and only work for 4 hours or 5 hours. And then, so they would have some time to spend together between the time that Terry got off work and Pam had to go in. And then you would have a little bit of time after Pam got off of work. So there was time for family stuff and to make sure everything was right with the household. During this time, Pam would cook dinner, leave dinner for the kids, or sometimes they would eat dinner together, and then she would go off to work. On this particular day, Terry has to drive her to work and then pick her up afterwards. This has been going on for some time because Pam had a DWI and did not have a license at the time. So Terry Hobbs gets home from work. And, well, let me back up for a second. Pam sees Michael Moore and her son, Stevie Branch, at the house. They leave together to go off and play. At some point, Christopher Byers shows up to play with the other two boys. But the boys have already left, and she tells Christopher they've gone. Well, Christopher notices that one of his favorite shows, The Muppet Babies, is on, and he asks if he could come in and watch it for a little bit. She says that Christopher comes in, he watches Muppet Babies. He might have been in the house for about 15, 20 minutes.
Right.
And she believes that the show goes off, that it ends about 3:30, maybe 4 o'clock, and that he had left when the show was over.
But you must feel pretty comfortable with her if you're going to ask to stay and watch a show.
Yeah, and she would tell her son, Stevie, that he needs to be home at 4:30 because she needs to go to work at 5, and Terry is going to put all of them they're all going to get in the car, and Terry's going to drive Pam to work. Well, Terry comes home from work, and he asks, where is Frog Leg? I guess that's what he called Stevie Branch. And she says, well, he's out playing with his friends. 4 o'clock comes, and
funny nickname, though.
Yeah, and Stevie Branch never comes home. So Terry Hobbs, Pam, and their daughter Amanda get in the vehicle together. They're going to drive Pam to work, but their idea is that they're going to stop by Stevie Branch's friend's house, who was seen left with Michael Moore. They're going to swing by the Moore house and ask if they've seen Stevie or if they could pick up Stevie.
Yeah, because now there's some concern here because you have to go to work. You don't want to just leave your kid while your husband drops you off at work. So then they go to stop by the Moore's house.
They swing by the Moore's house, and of course the boys are not there. Now, this would make sense why later Dana Moore would say to Mark Byers that Stevie Branch's father's been out looking for him as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we can back up that information. They don't find Stevie. They go to Pam's work. He drops off Pam, and he comes home, and he says on his way home that him and Amanda would drive through the neighborhood and continue to look for Stevie. Now, one of the stops that they made, he says that we stopped by the Moore house again, and at this point he got there, and it didn't appear that anything had changed. He didn't see any bicycles in the front yard,
right,
and didn't see the boys playing, so he continued on. He then says that they drove around the neighborhood for about 30 minutes, and then they went back to the house to see if Stevie Branch would have returned home by this time. Now, from the best I can put this together, Captain, I believe that this would put Terry Hobbs and Amanda at home around 6 p.m. Terry says that shortly after this is when Dana Moore drops by his house, and he says, he's talking with her, and he says, have you seen Michael Moore? And Terry says, no, I thought he was out with your boy. I was expecting to find him at your house.
Right.
And at this point, this is when Terry follows, shortly afterwards, he would go back to the Moore house one more time. And this is where he would meet Mark Byers for the very first time. And they would figure out that both of their sons are missing.
At this point is when Hobbs knows that not only is his boy missing, but 3 boys.
Yeah, so this would have had to have taken place but sometime between 7:30 and 8. This would have been after Mark Byers came home and was waiting to call the police.
Mm-hmm.
So after he meets Mark Byers, this is where Terry says that he went to his friend David Jacoby's house. And he goes there because they were good friends. He was good friends with David and his wife, Bobby. And on several occasions, the Jacobys, or Bobby Jacoby, had watched his daughter, Amanda. And so he goes by and he asks David if he would help him search for Stevie, and while they're searching, if he could leave Amanda with Bobby. After searching with his friend David, now David would back up some of this story. His story's a little different, but David would say, yes, I went out with Terry Hobbs, and he was asked specifically, did your wife or girlfriend, Bobby, did she watch Amanda? And he says, now let's keep in mind, David Jacoby is being interviewed in 2007. This is many years after this crime has taken place. And he says, I can't remember for certain if Bobby would have watched Amanda, but she watched that kid so many times that it would seem likely that she probably did. He states that they went out and they did look in the woods. He was with Terry and they were looking in the woods. He was asked, what part of the woods did you go to? He says kind of like what Byers said. He says, I remember going up and down some trails. I remember being around the water, but I can't say specifically what part or parts of the woods we were in.
And if you watch West Memphis, you can tell that this bothers him. It bothers him that he can't remember. And he's really start questioning his friend about his original story. But we got to remember that Hobbs's original story and Pam's original story happens on the 10th, 5 days afterwards, not however many years later, 14 years later.
Yeah, and we should also point out here that the story that the police collected on May 10th in 1993 was an account by Pam Hobbs. There was no Terry Hobbs present. He was not home at the time that the officers came to interview
it's not
her.
It's coming from Pam Hobbs, but it's also coming from all these other stories that they're piecing together.
Correct, yeah. And Mark Byers is a big part of this because they spent so much time talking to him.
Well, he loves to talk.
And they were able to get a lot of different times and a lot of different details of that night from him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Terry says that after they searched the woods... Now, back to what you were saying, Captain, about David Jacoby and how he seemed even upset that he couldn't remember certain details.
Yeah.
Now, he was asked specifically... Did you guys search in the area where the boys were found? And he flat out says, I'm not certain. I'm not very clear on where exactly the boys were found. All I can say is that I know that we searched in the woods. We went into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
We went up and down some trails, and we went near the water.
Right,
on
and this
several
is when
occasions.
there's light out. But he does talk a little bit in the West of Memphis documentary. He talks about how they didn't go searching right away. He remembers them playing guitars because they normally would play guitars. And then at some point, Terry Hobbs showed him how to play something. But again, was that the 5th or was it just some other random day?
Well, it would have had to have been the 5th because David Jacoby did go to work on the 6th and the boys were found in the afternoon.
No, what I'm saying is...
were they playing guitar on some random
Right,
day?
but what I'm saying is he's telling a story of 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, how many times did they sit down and play guitar? It's the same thing when he says, oh, yeah, well, we watched Amanda a bunch. So I can assume maybe we watched them, but it's the same thing with the picking out a guitar.
And according to Terry, that after they searched the woods for a while, they couldn't find Stevie, that this is when he took David Jacoby home and dropped him off and picked up the daughter, Amanda, and continued on to pick up Pam. Now, he says that he would have arrived at the Catfish Island restaurant where Pam worked at 9 p.m. Now, this is probably fairly accurate because let's look at Pam's story. Now, Pam says all of the same things up until this point, right? So Pam says that Terry Hobbs arrived shortly after 9 p.m. And at that point, Terry had came into the restaurant. He made a phone call on the payphone without telling her who he was calling or why. And then they go outside, and Pam discovers that only Amanda is in the vehicle. She expected to see Stevie. Stevie's still missing.
She's like, where's Stevie at?
Now, according to Terry says that he told her right away or very quickly after he saw her that we were unable to find him. He's still missing.
Right.
So there's a little discrepancy between the two, but basically the officer was dispatched and he left and arrived shortly after 9:24 p.m. So this would back up Terry Hobbs' story a little bit that he arrived, he says right at 9 p.m. Pamela Hobbs says shortly after 9 p.m. So we know that this is accurate because...
I mean, but we always got to do my math. Add 5 to 10 minutes either way.
Well, let's say it was 9:30 when the report was given, but we obviously know that Pam Hobbs was present for the report, and she does state that Terry, even though he's not mentioned in the report, that he was present. Now, she would go on to say that after they left the restaurant, that on the way home, that they continued to look. At some point, Terry Hobbs would go back and pick up his friend, David Jacoby.
Well, now we got to go back just a little bit because there is a discrepancy here because the police recently interviewed Hobbs because a lot of people, based on this new evidence and stuff that comes out that we'll talk about later, there was a lot of pressure to, you guys didn't really interview this guy enough. You talked to Pam Hobbs, maybe enough, but not Terry Hobbs enough. And he claims that when he picks her up, that her first thing is she says he's dead. And he said, well, that's a crazy thing to say. She goes, well, he's dead. And she wants to know where her ex-husband is at the time. Now, they go back and figure out that the ex-husband was not even around that area, because I think her major concern, I mean, she claimed, from what Terry Hobbs says, she said he's dead. But I think her concern was that her ex-husband came and picked him up and just took him away.
Yeah, and it's a mild discrepancy, because he says that she said he's dead. Now, Pam Hobbs would report that she did immediately suspect her ex-husband may have come and abducted the boy.
Right.
Because he had threatened her, years before that at some point I'm going to come and get Stevie, and he's going to live with me. So, I mean, who knows? Who knows exactly what was said? But it is agreed upon by the two of them that it's
very close. Their stories are very close.
Exactly. Now, they would both agree that they went and searched for the boys afterwards. Pam said that she was in the woods very briefly that night.
But the mosquitoes were so bad.
Not only the mosquitoes were bad, and other people would report that as well, but Pam went on to say further that there was something about the area that really kind of scared her and terrified her, and she didn't want to be in that area.
Mm-hmm. And at this part, it's real dark, so it'd be hard to see anything.
Now, so David Jacoby, as you said, his account is a little bit different than Terry Hobbs. Mm-hmm. Yes, he says that Terry Hobbs would have come over about 5:30 or 6 p.m. that day, and they would have played guitar, and probably Amanda would have sat with Bobby and hung out with her while they played guitar. David believes that they played guitar for about an hour, so this would put it at 6:37 p.m., and that Terry had said that he needed to go home to see if Stevie had come home.
Right.
So he leaves for a while. Now, he doesn't know exactly what time he sees Terry again, but what he does say is he does recall searching in the woods with Terry with flashlights, so this would be after dark. And he also remembers seeing Mark Byers. Now, Mark Byers is what, like 6'4", 6'5"?
I'm not really for sure.
Right,
he's a tall guy though.
He's a big dude, and he's an unforgettable character.
Yeah, he's something.
And this is what I find interesting, though. Mark Byers says, I remember meeting Terry Hobbs' friend. I don't recall his name.
Right, so it kind of backs up the story.
We know David Jacoby was there, and he was probably that friend that Mark Byers was referring to, because Jacoby says, I remember meeting Mark Byers. And how could you forget meeting Mark Byers? He also says that the other person that was with them for part or most of the night was Jackie Hicks. Jackie Hicks is Pamela's dad. He did say that he had been to the pipe area, that at some point they did go to the pipe or over the pipe. And again, he was asked if they were around where the boys were found, and he said he didn't know exactly where the boys were found.
Right.
The only other discrepancy that we should point out in this timeline here is according to Ryan. Now, Ryan is the stepson of John Mark Byers. Now, the first major discrepancy is that there is some dispute between the two of what time Ryan went to bed. Did he go to bed at 11? Did he go to bed at midnight? Or did he go out and continue searching with John Mark Byers? It's a little unclear, but again, as you had said, they were both interviewed days afterwards.
Yeah, I think the kid would actually know more because it's a school night. So when, maybe the kid didn't think it was super serious. I'm going and looking for my brother, but I also get to stay up late on a school night.
And not only that, he's out with some of his friends or neighborhood kids his age, and they're looking as well. And the one thing we should point out is one thing that Ryan would report while he was searching in the woods. So he says between 9:30 and 10 that they heard he and his two friends, now this is backed up by their reports as well, that he and his two friends had heard 5 loud splashes in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around this time that they had heard what he said was a gunshot, what Ryan said was a gunshot. Now keep in mind, at approximately this same time, John Mark Byers is in those same woods looking as well, and maybe the police officer is left at this time. We don't know exactly, but there's a lot of people, as you said, in and out of these
20,
woods.
20 people looking.
He says that after the 5 splashes that they started calling out, who's there? Is there anybody there?
They're getting a little freaked out.
And then they hear what they think is a gunshot, and they decide to get out of the woods and look elsewhere. He would report this to John Mark Byers later that night or the next day. I'm not certain. Mm-hmm. Now, both of them bring it up when they discuss this night with police. Now, John Mark Byers says that he had pointed out to the boy that he thought he had heard something as well. He wasn't sure that he had heard splashing, but he thought he had heard something that sounded like a car backfiring.
Right. And this guy's an avid gun shooter.
Yeah.
So he would know if it was a gunfire or if it was something else. And also around that time, sometimes in the summer you'll just hear fireworks going off.
Or it could also be in relationship to how your proximity to that noise.
Yeah.
Your opinion of what you heard. Now, when probed by police, Ryan would say it's possible that it was a car backfire.
Yeah, or something other than a gunshot.
Yeah, he said he wasn't certain. They were already kind of scared looking in the woods to begin with after dark. I wanted to point out that discrepancy because I think that might come into play later. These are the police reports and the family's accounts of what they were doing and what each other were doing at the time of the search. Mm-hmm. And keep in mind, they did search the next day, and of course they found nothing, but most of them were together for most of the search the following day. I couldn't find much time that any one of them were alone on the 6th.
So basically there's some searching going on in the morning, and then the cops are now more involved. And then that's where they find the floating shoe, and now they find the bodies.
And not only that, at one point there was a meeting on the 6th where the parents had all gone to the school, or they met somewhere together with law enforcement to be brought up to speed on what's going on and where they intended to search. Because on the 6th, they had brought in other law enforcement agencies. We had talked about the helicopter, the sheriff's department.
But anyways, we kind of covered that. So the boys are found. Now the 10th. They're interviewing the family. We've kind of gone over that. But we're talking about now it's a town in panic, right? We need answers to what happened to these 3 boys and who did this, who is responsible.
And for as little amount of time that they spent questioning the families and talking to the families about their whereabouts and what was going on the 5th and the 6th, they ended up spending a lot of time on the other 2 parts of the investigation. They spent a lot of time talking to local pedophiles or people that were convicted or suspected of having...
Or just local weirdos.
Exactly. They spent a lot of time talking to those type of people and filling out reports and asking questions. They did go and they did spend a decent amount of time near Michael Moore's home and near Christopher Byers' home, going door to door asking questions. They didn't spend a ton of time going over by the Hobbs family's house, though. Now, keep in mind, you have the area that the boys were found. And just about a quarter mile south of that is where Moore and Byers had lived. And even further south than that is where Branch had lived. So they were really focusing on the Byers and Moore area. Now, they spent a lot of time, like you said, talking to local weirdos. And part of that, too, though, was people calling in with tips and, hey, we've seen this and we've saw that. Mm. And there were some people that were in question. People were calling saying that we had seen this or that. One thing that was in question was a hitchhiker was a person of interest. They had even actually sent out some notice to area police officers, to other police departments, that they wanted information if anybody had seen this hitchhiker. This was somebody that was seen in the area. They didn't have an ID or identification for him at the time. When police talked to these persons of interest, now there is a lot of people that they talk to, Captain, and there's very few notes on these persons. And some of these notes are just a paragraph long. And a lot of times they were quickly to disregard somebody because they had said they had an alibi, or they talked to one person and they did have an alibi. But on some of these people...
We're not talking about a huge staff, so they could figure out if all these alibis check out.
and they were interviewing a lot of people. And with some of these people, they did request things like fingerprints or, maybe a urine sample or blood sample, hair sample.
A lot of these people had stuff on file anyways.
And they were able to collect some of that information. So
it's funny that they have that information, but they don't have Mr. Bojangles' information because that was lost.
Yeah, they conveniently lost or maybe inconveniently lost the blood flecks that were found at the Bojangles restaurant. Now, they did collect some of these same items from some of the family members. Mm-hmm. They were able to collect these items from Mark Byers, from Melissa Byers, from
Pam Hobbs,
from Dana Moore. I don't know. I can't remember if they requested these items from Todd Moore, and I know they didn't request these items or receive them from Terry Hobbs. Right. But again, it's not through fault of Terry Hobbs. It was never requested.
Right. Yeah, you wouldn't see. Some people would go, "Oh, well, you're guilty because you didn't just submit this stuff all willy nilly." Well, if you're not asked for it, how do you know you're supposed to give it?
Now, we both agree that they could have spent more time investigating the families and figuring out what was going on there.
I think they could have dived more into the timeline details. I mean, I think they did some cross checking, but I think they could have found more holes.
And they could have talked to all of them much sooner and recorded this information much sooner.
Well, and they should. I mean, there's actual interviews where they're together. It's like, no, you're supposed to separate everybody. Because what if this person's just trying to line up their story with yours?
Yeah, they would interview the husband and wife together.
Right. You should have separated them. But again, it's a small staff, and they probably don't see a lot of things like this.
I do believe that they could have spent some more time on the weirdos and the miscellaneous tips that they were receiving. Now, the problem with this is when you look at these tips, some of them are complete waste of time and waste of energy and their resources.
Right.
I mean, one person that they interviewed was somebody that was calling the police department. He lived in Arizona. He had a dream that he was talking to one of the dead boys and that he had seen things through one of the dead boys' eyes, and he gave his own account of what was seen. Now, one thing that they did spend a lot of time on was they were searching for vans. They wanted to investigate and find out everybody in the area that had a van, because they had come across, when they went and did their door-to-door searches and when they were receiving these miscellaneous tips, there were several people that had reported seeing a van. Now, there are varying descriptions of this van. Sometimes it was a black van. Sometimes it was a tan van. Sometimes it was a white van. And
they're looking for a creeper van, basically.
Exactly. And these are only reports that they're getting by people getting an uneasy feeling about seeing whatever color van this was. Mm-hmm. But one that kept coming up was there was a report of a white van. That's what they were really looking for, but they were willing to investigate.
Which is the typical creeper color.
They were willing to investigate any actual van, but the only reports that I could find that seemed suspicious were that of a black, tan, or white van. Now, there are multiple reports of people having seen a white van. Some of these people saying that it was driven by a young man, some by a young white man, some by an older white man, and some saying a black man. And on one occasion, somebody had even gone on further to say that the van was a white van driven by a black man, and it was an Illinois plate. It was an out-of-town plate.
That's what's so difficult with eyewitness testimonies is they're all over the place, and some of them don't even sound logical. But they are looking at some weirdos.
They are looking
weirdos, and they get a tip from the juvenile officer.
Jerry Driver is the juvenile officer in which you're speaking of. Shortly after the murders, he provides some of the investigators with a list. Now, what's on this list? There's a list of 8 names.
It happens on the 8th, but probably what's going down is, so they find the boys on the 6th, so on the 7th, they're probably sitting around going, okay, well, who are some possible suspects right off the top of our head, other than, like, obviously family members? And that's when he comes up with this list. Now, a lot of juvenile officers work closely with detectives in most branches.
Yeah, and he provides them with this list because he has kind of told them for the last year that, hey, there's a lot of gang or satanic activity going on amongst these teenagers in the area. And you should stay aware of that because they probably will commit crimes. So after the murders, he provides these investigators with a list of names that it has 8 names on it. Now, 4 of the names are known to us, and those names are Jessie Misskelley, Jason Baldwin, Damien Echols, and Dominique Terre. Now, let's introduce these one at a time. So first we have Jessie Misskelley Jr. He lives with his dad. He's about 17 years old at the time. And he has been held back 2 grades. He drops out of high school. He's not a very, well, how should we say this?
I think he's just kind of a simple person. A lot of people say he has a low IQ. He just comes across as pretty simple to me.
A little childlike for his age.
Yeah.
So he's dropped out of school and he works. He does have a job. He works in roofing, and it's full time. Who knows? It's a little unclear, but it sounds like
roofing is a tough job. I mean, he's doing grunt work.
And from my understanding is obviously there's not always work. You know, you're only working that day if there's a roof to build.
Right.
So he is working when jobs are available. He wants to be a professional wrestler, and he knows some of the other people on the list. He would go on to say that he knows Jason Baldwin. He considers Jason Baldwin to be a nice kid and a friend of his. And he knows that Jason hangs out with a kid named Damien Echols. Mm-hmm. And he describes Damien as someone who seems to be all right, but he dresses in black and he's definitely kind of weird. The next name is Jason Baldwin. Jason Baldwin lives with his mother. His mother has some mental issues. And Jason is 16 years old. But his mother works at night. So a lot of times what Jason's job is after he comes home from school, he then has to stay with his siblings and watch them while his mother is at work.
Yeah, and Jessie Misskelley is known in the neighborhood to watch a bunch of the kids as well. And I think it's because, here's this, sweet kind of simple kid, and we'll leave our kids with him, a cheap babysitter.
And Jason is described by other kids as kind of... I don't, not goth. Goth's not the right word. He's kind of one of those headbanger kids, one of the heavy metal
they
kids.
use the word goth, but they
misuse it.
These kids are not goth.
You might be able to use it. It would be a stretch, but you might be able to use it for Damien, but definitely not for Jason. Jason's like jeans. He's blue jeans, concert T-shirt kind of guy.
He is MTV Headbangers Ball.
Yeah, and he's the type of kid, he doesn't particularly love school or the other kids there, but he actually does fairly well in school.
Yeah, he seems like a smart kid.
Yeah, he completes his work and he participates, and a lot of his teachers had good things to say about him. Now, it is well known to everybody in the area that his best friend is Damien Echols.
Which is a couple years older.
Damien Echols is 18 years old in 1993. Now, Damien's real name is Michael Hutchinson. He grew up probably even more poor than Jessie Misskelley and Jason Baldwin, who they all lived in basically the same trailer park area. And Damien, his parents are Jack and Pam Echols, and he has a sister, Michelle. And when he was younger, he was like 16-ish, he became known to police because he was dating a girl named Deanna. Now, Deanna was a little bit younger than him, okay? Mm-hmm. So he had, they were getting together and wanted to be physical together.
Right.
Okay, so they were devising plans of how to be physical together.
Yeah, you sneak off.
Well, what would typically happen is when they were supposed to be at school, they would walk back to her place and try to hook up, and eventually they got caught. And this was not cool with her parents at all.
Right.
Her parents threw a big fit. She's no longer allowed to see Damien.
Well, because he's kind of the older, kind of a weirdo in their eyes.
He's a couple years older. Now, he's been held back 2 grades as well. Now, he's...
Genius.
Yeah. It is for different reasons, I guess, but he claims it's because he liked going to school, but he did not want to do any of the work.
He makes a lot of claims, though.
I actually believe there's one point where he's talking and he talks about a kid that there's very few kids that he liked or idolized in school, but there was one kid that he talked about that he seemed to idolize a bit, who was a kid that had been held back, and he liked how cool and casual that guy was and how he didn't have to go along with the trends because he was so much older than the other 2 kids.
Cool and casual.
I almost wondered that it was calculated that he was held back a couple years. Regardless,
either way, it's silly.
Regardless, he's no longer allowed to see his girlfriend. Now, this breaks his heart. He claims to have been in love with her at the time. And they do this little Romeo and Juliet routine.
Okay.
Where if they can't be together, they're either going to run away or they're going to have a suicide pact. And so what happens
This is another genius idea.
Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. When you can't be together, suicide pact works every time.
That's the way to go.
They come up with the idea of let's run away. Okay, well
that's better than a suicide pact.
Yeah, but this presents a big problem because at the time...
Because you can't even get through high school.
And not only that, Damien is 16, but he does not have a driver's license or access to a vehicle. He's probably only driven a vehicle once at this point in his life. And his girlfriend is not even 16 yet. So, again, no license, no access to a vehicle. So, running away doesn't work out to be driving away. It works out to be walking away. Mm-hmm. So, they walk away, and they decide that they're going to crash for an evening in an abandoned trailer. And
that's romantic. Yeah. They light some candles in this smelly old abandoned trailer.
It's very Romeo and Juliet 1993, West Memphis. They hang out in this abandoned trailer, and the cops or somehow the neighborhood kids or somebody figures out that they're there.
They probably saw the candles being lit, and they're like, whoa, somebody's there.
They call the police, and the police come, and they find the two of them, and they arrest them. And basically what happens is they return the girl to her parents, and they're going to press charges against the boy, Damien Echols.
Right.
And
which is stupid because they both were making stupid decisions, you know.
Yeah, and because he's a little bit older, the fault is falling on him. Mm-hmm. And it's discussed. Now, Jerry Driver, he's the guy that came up with this list. He's aware of Damien Echols. He was involved in arresting Damien Echols when he was 16 years old.
Right.
He would say that Damien Echols was, he had reviewed some of his journals, and that it was clear to him that this boy was evil. He was involved in Satanism and all kinds that he probably wanted to murder people, sacrifice people.
Yeah, well, I think Damien was interested in some spiritual stuff, which to, I think, people in that area was just odd.
And well, he said that he had threatened the father of his girlfriend.
Yeah, that sounds like something you do if you're trying to run away with the daughter.
Not only that, I think it's probably pretty common. I mean, I would bet you that when the parents told her that she could no longer see Damien, that the father probably said a few bad things about Damien.
Yeah, well, and they probably could have stopped the charges, and they didn't. So he's going, screw you, old man.
Well, what ends up happening is that Jerry Driver explains to Damien and Damien's parents that Damien wouldn't have to go to jail. He wouldn't have to serve any time or be even presented with these charges if he would just go to a mental hospital and get checked out. So they agree to this. And he goes to the mental hospital, and they realize that he's probably depressed and that he's got some issues going on.
And that might have had something to do with the suicide pact.
Definitely. And Damien does state, yeah, I was depressed. I lived in West Memphis. My family was dirt poor, and I had just been taken away from my girlfriend, the one thing that I had that I liked, and I can't see her anymore.
Yeah.
Well,
he's kind of a hopeless romantic.
We could go on and on about Damien Echols and his juvenile criminal career, I guess, and actually more, not so much
his
as
mental state,
not so much his criminal career, because there wasn't much more than that. That's all. That's all he really did.
Yeah, you made it sound like it was a big thing, and it wasn't.
What I meant to say was his character.
Well, then just say that in the first place.
But what we should say is, why would Jason Baldwin or Jessie Misskelley be on this list, and why would Jerry Driver know about those guys? Well, he knew about Jessie Misskelley because after Jessie Misskelley dropped out of school, Jessie Misskelley wanted to build a racetrack.
Okay.
And he thought he would build this racetrack.
Wait, so I can't finish high school, but I can build a racetrack.
And you can be a professional wrestler. So Misskelley had big dreams. All right. And so when he was building his racetrack, he decided that he needed some flags. Everybody that's watched NASCAR you got to have flags, baby. So he decides that he is going to go back to school, not actually go to school, but he's going to go visit the school because the marching band has flags, and he's going to steal them so he can use them for his racetrack. Well, he gets caught. You can't steal flags and then display them and hope not to get caught for stealing the flags. Mm-hmm. So that's how Jerry Driver knows about Jessie Misskelley. Jason Baldwin is even more innocent than those, I guess. He was charged with trespassing and vandalism. What had happened was there was an area that was frequented by a lot of kids. He had went there with some other kids. He went onto the property. They had some old broken down vehicles that had been there for God knows how long.
Busted some windows.
And they busted out a couple of windows. Yep. And they end up being charged with trespassing and vandalism. And actually the area that they so-called trespassed on, I could see being charged with vandalism, but the area that they trespassed, there was no signs, there was no chain fence, there was nothing,
if
whatever.
It's not your property, you don't break shit. How about let's just start with that. Also, I think it's just some of it is just a random list of 10 people that probably did something in the last couple years.
Well, it was 8 people, and
okay, so 8 people. So, but what's happening is the detectives, they're going, we don't have any leads, we don't have anything, and then they probably ask everybody in the department to think of something. So he sat down on his desk and came up with a list of 8. Yeah,
he came up with 8 kids that he believed that were in trouble with the law before, that were on his radar, and he believed that they were involved in heavy metal music or Satanism or in some kind of cult, maybe a gang. But for whatever reason, he deemed them to be troubled youths that he was going to keep an eye on. Now, the 4th name that we haven't mentioned yet was Dominique Terre. Now, Dominique Terre was actually Damien's girlfriend after the girl that he had gotten in trouble with.
Right.
Now, she was probably...
I
don't know.
Kids, you will get over the breakup. You'll move on.
I don't know why she was on Jerry Driver's radar other than the fact that she was dating Damien Echols.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything of her having a criminal past.
Well, and it could be as simple as the juvenile cop goes, I've been kind of following Damien, what's going on with him, and now he's dating this new girl. So he just knows of her. So he's had at least an incident with his ex-girlfriend. So maybe that's going to be something that repeats itself in the future.
Well, and at some point, now this would be July of 1992, Damien actually moves away from West Memphis. After he got out of the mental hospital for this problem with his girlfriend, his real father returned. Now, we didn't say why he changed his name. His original name was Michael Hutchinson. Well, that's because his father's last name was Hutchinson. And when him and his mother had split up, his mother met a man named Jack Echols. Well, at that point, Jack Echols decided to adopt her kids. And when he did so, Damien changed his name to Damien Echols. He took Jack's last name, and he says that he took the name Damien because at the time he was considering getting into Catholicism and that there was a Saint Damien that he respected and he wanted to take his name.
Yeah, and Saint Damien, what he did was he lived on an island and he took care of leopards. And he ended up getting leprosy himself and then dying. And after hearing that story, Damien thought, hey, this is a good guy to kind of model yourself after.
Now, some might find this weird, but I don't. I was raised Catholic, and anybody that was raised Catholic knows that once you confirm once you confirm yourself to the religion of Catholicism, that you can take on a Catholic name.
Yeah, what was your confirmation name?
Isaiah.
Mine was Kanye. Kanye West. I was ahead of my time.
Well, Michael Hutchinson's was Damien, and he took on his stepfather's last name.
Would have been cool if he would have went with Kanye Echols.
Kanye Echols. We have to reintroduce Vicky Hutchinson. Remember Vicky Hutchinson? She was the one that was questioned by police about the credit card overrun at the truck stop.
Yeah, she's the credit card thief.
And she had her son with her, who was 8 years old, Aaron, and he was friends with some or all of the boys that had gone missing. And he had told the story about seeing the Michael Moore boy talking to a black man after school, that the black man was coming to pick him up. And we know that this isn't true because Michael Moore went home after school. Now, Vicky finds out that there is that there is reason to believe, or that the police are interested in this Damien Echols character.
Yeah, because he's on a list 2 days before they even question the family.
Not only is on a list, but he has been approached by police, and he's had some interviews with them, and a lot of them are kind of off the record at this time.
Right, but he is very forthcoming, and he does fingerprints and whatever they ask. He's being cooperative.
Not only that, they take a picture of him, a Polaroid picture of Damien Echols when they talk to him the first time. Now, police would later say that they don't have this Polaroid picture. They don't know what they're talking about. But there was
it could just be some bullshit that somebody made up.
There was some rumor that police were going around town and they were asking people about what they had seen or what they had heard, or if they have heard anything. And not only that, that sometimes they were even presenting a picture and saying, do you know this person? Mm-hmm. Anyway, this gets back to Vicky Hutchinson, that they would be or want to know more information about Damien Echols. Well, she lives in the trailer park, and she lives right by Jessie Misskelley. She does not know Damien or Jason Baldwin, but she knows Jessie Misskelley pretty well, because on occasion he had watched her son. He had cut the grass for her, done chores. Pay. Yeah.
Find the simpleton.
And actually, she would describe Jessie Misskelley Jr. to police as a nice boy that lived by her, that seemed like he was always willing to help out whenever she needed it.
Yeah. It's also trying to make some money.
She tells police that she would be interested in helping them. Now, let's keep in mind, remember, we had talked...
Interested.
Yeah, she's interested because there's a reward. There's a $35,000 reward for information about the murders of these boys.
And she lives in a trailer park, so this is her golden ticket.
This is like the hitting the lottery.
Yeah, this is her Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. Charlie Bucket.
So she tells investigator Bray that she would be willing to help them out, and that she is going to talk to Jesse to see what he knows about the other boys, because he's the same age as Jason Baldwin and Damien Echols. They say that's fine, and that she should probably read up on witchcraft or Satanism in the meantime.
Yeah, that's what you need to do.
Well, they suggest that you should probably go to the library and research this stuff.
This is retarded.
Vicky states, I don't have a library card, and then...
Yeah, because she's a freaking genius.
And investigator Bray says, that's fine, you can borrow mine. So she does go to the library, and she does study up on some of the Satanism and witchcraft stuff, and she learns some of the terms and some of the terminology and, what to expect. Well, she tells Jessie Misskelley that she would be interested in meeting Damien and Jason, which Jessie finds weird because Vicky is 30. She's like in her early 30s. But Jessie said, I'll help you out anyway.
Yeah, because he's a nice kid.
He introduces her to them. Now, he doesn't know them. He knows Jason pretty well, but he doesn't know Damien very well. But the next time that he sees them, he tells them, hey, Vicky would like to meet you.
Right, but don't you think that if Vicky's sitting there talking to Jessie Misskelley about this stuff, and her main motivation is this $35,000, don't you think this is coming up in conversation at some point?
Well, she tells police that she had arranged to go on a date with Damien.
What?
Yeah, well, he's 18 at the time. And so she's going to go on to this date, and she went on a date with him, and she describes
But he has a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he's Captain Romance Pants. So...
Well, not only that, his girlfriend's pregnant at the time.
Right, so is it really a date, or is it just a hangout? Or...
Well...
Whatever it is.
I'm just telling you what Vicky told the police. Okay. We don't even know if this happened. Okay. Vicky tells the police that she went with Damien and Jessie Misskelley to what's called an SBAT. Now, what this is going to be a gathering of like-minded people that are there to worship Satan, and that they're getting together in some location that she was unsure of.
Sounds like a word that she read in a book, and then she just made this shit up.
But she was picked up by Damien and Jessie. She didn't drive. Damien arrived in a vehicle, and he was driving. And they went to this SBAT, and she said that she had seen people there that were painted, and they were decorated, and they were clearly worshiping Satan, and they were getting ready to have some kind of orgy. And she said that this really, really bothered her, so she told Damien that she had to leave.
Right.
He says that that's fine, I'll drive you home. And they leave Jessie there, and they go home. Now, she describes Damien as somebody who is kind of soft-spoken, and he doesn't like to talk a whole lot, but she can kind of talk to him and pry things out of him. She says when she does get him to talk, that he is talking to her quite a bit about the murders of the 3 boys. Now, he's not implicating himself as being involved in these murders, but he's explaining to her that he's been questioned multiple times by police, and for some reason they think that I've done it or I was involved.
Yeah, and then once you think that the cops think you did it, guess who pays attention to the case then?
Vicky would bring her son in to talk to the police one more time, because she's saying that Aaron now has more information regarding what happened with the boys. She's saying that, and Aaron's saying the same thing, that I had often gone into the woods with these other boys. And on occasion, we had witnessed some boys and some men doing some strange things. Said that on one occasion that there were 5 men in the woods, and some of them were dressed up. They were sitting in a circle. They were singing songs about the devil, and they were committing homosexual acts upon one another.
So kind of like a satanic circle jerk.
Well, and at the circle jerk, Aaron would describe what some of the men were wearing. And he went on to say, you know, what he saw, they had jewelry, they had certain clothing on.
Right.
Well, the following day, Vicky showed up to the police department, and she shows them an earring. Now, this is an earring that had like a snake or a skull or a snake coming out of a skull or something like that. But it, you know, kind of a
devil earring.
Yeah, heavy metal type looking earring. And now this was similar to some of the jewelry that was described at this satanic event that Aaron and his friends had seen in Robin Hood Hills. Now, she tells police, I found this in my trailer after hanging out with Damien. He must have dropped it in my trailer. Therefore, he's one of the satanic people that are going to Robin Hood Hills and having these meetings. Well, this is very interesting to the police now, isn't it?
Of course it is.
So they decide that they want to talk to Jessie Misskelley, because Jessie Misskelley is the person that was able to put Vicky in contact with Damien and Jason. Police would go on and they would pick up Jessie Misskelley. Now, remember, Misskelley's only 17 at the time.
He's only about 5 foot tall.
And so they talk to Jessie and they say, you know what? We have some questions we want to ask you. Would you mind coming down to the police department with us? And he says, I don't have any problem with that.
Right. So they're very interested in him, and he's very interested in this award money.
Well, he doesn't know.
Reward money.
He doesn't know that at the time. He's unclear why they even want to talk to him. When it becomes clear to him is after they go and talk to his father, because they have to ask for permission to talk to Jessie because he's under 18. His father figures out why they want to talk to him, and he tells his son, you know, look, there's reward money. They want to talk to you about what you might know about the murder of those 3 boys. Go ahead and tell them everything you know. Because if you do, maybe we can get this reward money.
Right.
And I guess Jessie thought that his father would be able to buy a new truck or something. Here it is, Jessie wanting to help again. And so Jessie Jr. and Jessie Sr. both agree to this interview. Jessie Sr. does not go along. He doesn't tag along for the interview.
Right.
Jr. goes off with the police officers, and he goes to the police department. And now they're going to interview Jessie Misskelley Jr.
Okay. But we're now an hour and a half into part 2. So we need to wrap this up. We're going to have to do a part 3, you know, because we got a lot more to cover.
There's a ton more to cover,
We're just getting started, really.
Well, then that's when the garage stays open and we throw an after party.
Yeah, so now we got the after party. And so for those that need more garage to listen to, we're going to put this out. We're not even going to wait a week. We're going to put it out.
We shouldn't wait a week because we got to get to season 3 at some point. It was my bad picking such a huge case to end season 2.
Well, it's a fascinating case. And so what we're going to do
it's the best case of season 2.
Yeah, I think so. And I think everybody's enjoying it. So if you want more Garage to listen to, we're going to release this the next day. So check that out. So 2 episodes, 1 week, back to back.
So to make that less confusing, how about we'll see you tomorrow in the garage. And until then, be good, be kind, and don't litter.
You can live out your MasterChef dreams when you find a professional on Angie to tackle your dream kitchen remodel. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Visit Angie.com. You can do this when you Angie that.